You ever hear a line that lands like a dropped plate, loud, sharp, and suddenly impossible to ignore? That's how it was when my cousin Brian looked at me across my parents' Thanksgiving table and said, deadpan, "Glad you're enjoying the college fund." For a split second I laughed like everyone else. Because what else do you do when a family member throws out a weird comment and the room is full of people? But the laugh didn't sit right in my chest. And when I caught Emily's face in the dim light of the dining room, she was gone, the color drained out of her, her fork paused midair, and she looked like someone had pulled a heavy curtain over her. I'm Mark. I have a 9-year-old named Lily, a job that keeps me busy and proud, and I always thought my marriage with Emily was solid in that quiet, ordinary way marriages become, dependable, messy, forgiving. We met in college. She was the artsy one with paint under her nails. I was the accounting major who liked putting numbers in neat columns, opposites, the kind people say balance about, and for a long time that was true. I never expected to spend a holiday feeling like the floor had opened up beneath me. That Thanksgiving began like every other. The new house my parents had moved into smelled faintly of wood smoke from my dad's new smoker. My mom had somehow managed to create 10 side dishes in a kitchen half the size it used to be. Cousins were arguing about football in one corner and my aunt was joking about someone's ill-advised haircut in another. Emily volunteered to help my mom with the pies and casseroles. She was quieter that morning, which I had attributed to a long week at work. But looking back, the little signs were there, a phone screen turned face down, the occasional quick smile she gave no one, a slight tension below her eyes. I should have asked more, pressed harder, but I didn't. I trusted. We all sat down at that long, creaky table, and for a moment I let myself breathe in the noise and the smell of gravy and candied yams and felt thankful. Then Brian's comment landed, and it felt like a pebble in a pond, a small thing that rippled outward until everything changed. When I asked him, "What are you talking about?" he shrugged like he was playing the innocent, but his shrug had the weight of someone hiding something. Emily got up to clear her plate and avoided my eyes. At the time, I chalked it up to family weirdness and tried to laugh along, but I couldn't sleep that night. The line, college fund, looped around in my head until I couldn't ignore it. Why would my cousin even mention that? What did he mean? The next morning, while she was in the shower, I opened our bank app because it's a small, stupid ritual I have, check balances, budget for the month, make sure everything's as it should be. I expected to see the slow, steady drip of savings for Lily's future. Instead, I stared at a number that made my stomach fall out of my body. The account was almost empty, $42,000 gone. I stared at that figure like it was a foreign language. I scrolled through the transaction history with hands that felt numb and found withdrawals, transfers, payments out in sums that didn't add up to anything sensible, big transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, multiple withdrawals labeled vaguely. I wasn't one to panic first and ask questions later, but this was our daughter's college money. I'd been putting money away since Lily was born, penny by penny, paycheck by paycheck, so she could have a cushion, a chance at a better start. I closed the laptop with my heart hammering, and when Emily came out wrapped in a towel, I simply said, "Where's the college fund?" She went from stunned to defensive in a heartbeat. "What are you talking about?" she asked like she hadn't heard me. I put the screen in front of her. She looked at it, and for a second all the color left her face. "I needed it," she said finally. And that, "I needed it," was like a fist to the gut because need is something you explain, not something you use as an excuse to steal your child's future. She said, "It's complicated," a phrase that, over the next few days, knitted itself into the tense fabric of our home. Complicated, she explained in stilted fragments, because she felt guilty about someone from her past who had been there for her when she was broke and lonely in college. She said he'd gotten into trouble, debts piling up, and she was helping him. "He helped me when I had nothing," she said in a voice that tried to be earnest and sad, but to me it sounded like someone trying to paint over a hole in the wall with cheap paint. "I thought I'd replace it before you noticed," she tried, like that made it okay. There are harms that are immediate and violent, and others that are slow like mold on the foundation, eating away at everything you thought secure. This was the latter. I left that night and slept on my brother's couch because the house felt like a stranger's home. I didn't want to raise my voice in front of Lily and scare her, but I also couldn't pretend nothing had happened. I started investigating the cold way you investigate when trust has evaporated. I printed bank statements, made lists of transactions, stayed up reading every message on shared devices, things that all felt hateful and necessary. I went to Brian because he had been the one to throw the first match, and I walked into his garage angry and tired and not even sure what I wanted from him. He squinted in the light and admitted he'd known for months. He'd seen texts, he'd seen transfers, he'd thought I already knew because his wife had noticed, because some of the group chats had mentioned it in passing. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, more hurt than I expected to be. He shrugged and said, "I didn't want to make it worse, and honestly, I thought maybe she was borrowing and paying you back." The fact that someone in my family had actually suspected and decided to keep quiet hurt in ways my anger didn't cover. It was like being betrayed twice, once by the person who took the money and once by the people who let me sit in ignorance. Then there was the man, Jason, Emily's college boyfriend, the person she said she was helping. I met him in the space of a conversation that felt like stepping into a dark room and finding a figure you vaguely recognize. He was both familiar and wrong in a way that made my stomach churn. He was charming in a way that made me understand how someone might fall for him in their early 20s and still be pulled back years later by some nostalgic need. He admitted debt, trouble, needing cash for things he'd mismanaged. He didn't pretend to be an angel. He talked about old times and how Emily had been the one person who never left his side. Listening to him, part of me wanted to punch him, and another part wanted to wrap myself around my daughter and never let go. When I confronted Emily again, there was a moment of total honesty, not an apology so much as a quick, naked admission that she had been sending money for months. She had transferred chunks, convinced herself she could make it right, and then transferred more. She said she had thought of me as a safe place, someone who would understand because he had helped her, because we were in love. But love, I learned, can become a justification for foolish decisions if you let it. She had let it. What baffled me most was how carefully she hid it. She knew our passwords. Yes, she knew how I'd become complacent over the years, how I trusted, how we fell into routines where the small, practical things are handled quietly and the emotional things assumed. She had used that quiet to move money out in pieces, to send it through apps that felt ephemeral and therefore innocuous, like Venmo notes that said lunch or help, things that in a glance looked ordinary. It took nights of me calling bank support, tracing where certain wires went, and even asking for legal advice to see the extent of it. My lawyer's face when I said 42,000 was a flat expression of someone hearing a number they'd seen 100 times but not expected in a family context. You can seek restitution, she said, and I wanted to go to court not for revenge but to have facts laid bare, to have an accounting of what happened so that I could build a new reality out of truth. Filing for separation felt like admitting a failure I had not wanted to name, and I could hear how childish that sounded when I said it out loud, but the failure was not in loving someone or trusting them. It was in letting that trust go unchecked when the signs were there. Lily was the hardest part of all this. How do you tell a 9-year-old that the future you were saving for her has been gambled away in pieces? How do you explain betrayal without teaching bitterness? I remember sitting on the floor in her room with her small hands in mine, telling her the truth the best way I could. We're okay, kiddo. Daddy messed up some things, but I promise I'll fix what I can. She blinked at me with a solemn face that made me think she was older than her years, and then she asked me, simply, will I still go to college? The bluntness of her question made my throat close. She didn't need the intricacies of adult mistakes. She needed a plan and someone who would fight for her, so I opened a new account in my name, automatic transfers every paycheck, small but consistent, and I started cutting things out of our budget that were not essential. I worked more hours where I could, took on freelance bookkeeping on nights, anything that would patch the hole. There was humiliation in that, explaining to friends why we were tightening our belts, watching Emily's parents look at me like I'd failed somehow, but there was also a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew where the money was, where it needed to go, and what I had to do to build it back. The divorce dragged on with the slow cruelty of legal paperwork. Emily alternated between pleading and a stoic resignation that made me feel like we were two people reading entirely different scripts. Sometimes she called at night, voice small and raw, asking if we could try counseling first, if we could save our family. Other times she said nothing, letting me bear the silence. Friends offered advice that ranged from dump her to fight for your marriage. But this wasn't a thing that fit neat little boxes. It was messy, it was real life, and it was mine to untangle. On the 1-year anniversary of that Thanksgiving, I found myself at another family dinner. The table was smaller this time because some relatives chose sides in ways I never expected. Others picked silence. Brian sat across from me with a look that suggested regret. He apologized for not telling me sooner. It was a small apology on the scale of what had happened, and yet I accepted it, not because it erased anything but because carrying that particular anger would have eaten me alive. I've learned something harsh and steady through all this. People are complicated mixtures of love and selfishness, and sometimes love is not enough to prevent harm. I've also learned that gratitude can be brutal and beautiful at the same time. I'm grateful that the truth came out when it did, because it meant Lily didn't continue living a lie, and it meant I could begin to rebuild with open eyes. Some nights I still think about Emily and how quickly the person you love can become someone you have to set boundaries with. I hope she's found a way to make peace with her choices. Truly hope she's getting help for whatever led her to make those transfers. But the main thing I focused on after the dust settled was my daughter. I wanted to show her that betrayal doesn't define her life, and that resilience is a practical thing, saving every month, showing up at parent-teacher night without fail, making her favorite pancakes on Saturday mornings even when I'm exhausted. There are days when the loss of those $42,000 still stings like a bruise, and there are days when I feel proud of the slow, patient work of rebuilding. I won't lie and say it's simple. Sometimes it's lonely and humiliating and heavy, but when Lily laughs in the living room with her friends, when she shows me a drawing she's proud of, I remember why I get up and keep going. The line Brian dropped that night could have been a cruel barb meant to shame. Instead, in the aftermath, it became a strange kind of lifeline, a wake-up call that forced me to see clearly, to stop assuming, and to start acting. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening to this story, it's this: don't let convenience become the enemy of vigilance. Trust the people you love, but keep your eyes open. And if you ever hear someone make a joke about something serious, don't let it slide because you don't want to make waves. Sometimes that small ripple is the first sign of a crack that needs to be fixed before the whole foundation gives way.